James Gladstone and Liam Cohen met with the media for a pre-draft luncheon. I'll tell you what they said, what they didn't say. Here on Locked On Jaguar.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right. It's your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast that you can find wherever you get your podcast. Just make sure whether you watch or listen, you tap in each and every day to wherever that location is to make sure you do not miss an episode. It's going to be a fun show today. All right. We're going to tell you where we end up, what I think will happen in the draft. I ain't getting no inside information. None. And I'm not just saying that so y'all won't think that I'm giving up inside information. No, I'm doing a real good job at reading the room. So I'm going to tell you what I think happens. Keeping things simple. That's what intangibly rich means to me. Keep it simple, common sense. Don't bring nobody in the building that they ain't going to work here. And only bring people in the building that you believe can conform to the style and to the workflow that we have here. Period. Point blank, end of discussion. We'll talk about that in the middle of the show. And at the very top, James Gladstone and Liam Cohen. I don't know why I feel like I got a burp, but I'm not. James Gladstone and Liam Cohen talk draft strategy. Let me tell you what they did not do. Tell you their strategy for the draft. But they did outline that their draft strategy is to do the things that's going to help this team move forward and be great in the future. We can read between the lines, though, and kind of extract some things. I've met Lee. I'd seen Liam before. This is my first time actually running into Tony. We exchanged some pleasantries. Tony, you never know who's watching, man. Tony goes, man, you're always in the hospital, man. I thought you were done with surgery. We had that little 5-minute medical briefing. But James Gladstone, from what I had seen, this is my first time meeting him in person or talking to him in person or engaging with him in person. He seemed like a little more loose today than he had been before, right? They've gone through this process. I will tell you this, what I did mention to Baselli. I said, hey, man, how's it feel being on that side? He says, it's more fun doing it than it is to talk about it. So I said, I totally agree. I understand what the dog days of content can be like. So, yeah, I get it. But actually doing it where it really, really does matter. I think it's surreal for all of these guys. And I think the job that they have to do, it means a lot. It's super, super important to them, but I don't think they're getting caught up into it. And I did like some of the things that I heard from the presser today. So we'll get into some of that. I'm getting the feeling that at 5, we don't need to overthink this thing. I'm getting a feeling that when you hear them talk, that body of work matters. Body of work in terms of where you played, what you did, how'd you do it, what does the guidance counselor say, what does the strength coach think about you? Basically, I recall when someone very close to me was being recruited to play basketball. Rick Pitino was at Louisville. And I was there. I was present when he was having a conversation with Rick Pitino. It's ironic. Y'all gotta bear with me. I ain't making this up. But Pitino said, look, if you're here to play basketball, put basketball first and work out, cool. I promise you this is what he said. He said, if you're here to chase girls and hang out and see how many chicks you can date, this ain't for you. Now, you Google Rick Pitino, you'll understand the irony. But this ain't necessarily do what I say, not what I do. What I say, not what I do. That's kind of the way that comes across. Because Pitino got in a little bit of trouble involving somebody who wasn't his old lady. But still, you get the point. The point is you gotta be honest. Don't draft people if you're gonna bring them here, and you know that the parameters and the things that you have set up as a franchise, they don't meet those things, right? Like, what does that person love? What is this person yoked up on? So the question that I asked James Gladstone was, to get into those intangibles, meaning the things that you don't see, I kind of phrased it like that helps you in the later part of the process. But early on, when you're picking at number 5, man, it kind of jumps out at you, doesn't it? It obviously said, and he kind of went, should it be obvious? He says the thing that he wanted to focus on was remaining disciplined to those intangibles, right? So what are they? Mental toughness, physical toughness. For all of this talk about alignment and all of these things, I did a show on this within the last 2 weeks. I said, don't think for 1 minute that these dudes aren't tough. Y'all could think because they smile and it's nice stories and it's pleasant and Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. Let me explain something to you. Those dudes got to where they are in a business that will fire you so fast. So I think they got to where they are by adhering to certain standards. And when you have adhered to certain standards and you have done certain things, one of the call chants, if you will, of one of my favorite fraternities is, as all have done who have gone this way before me. Meaning, I'm never going to ask you to do something that I didn't do. I'm never going to ask you to play by rules that I didn't have to play by. I'm never going to expect you to be able to do things without the same resources, especially if those things are things that I had to endure. I'm not going to give you less resources than I had. In fact, I'm going to give you even more. And all you got to do is be a football playing Jesse that comes in here. You have to be, I think this means you have to be the kind of person, not the one that comes to work every day. I think that's too shallow. I think you have to be the kind of person that you have to kick out of the facility, and that the person that when you tell them to take time off, that they beg you to be there. I really do believe the sort of culture that they're setting up, that's what it is, that it's football. We're all junkies. We all get to do this by looking at and watching the Jaguars, the productions that they're putting out. I heard Liam Cohen say something to the effect of, ever since we were little, we wanted to be a part of the NFL in some way or somehow. And he bent down and he put his hand down, like 3 feet off the ground, and said, since we were this big, whether it's a player, coach, he says, man, and we're here. We are living a dream. And I think what you're going to get from them is they want players like that, regardless if they're in round 1 or round 7, or is a free agent, that looks at this every day as not like work, but that they're living their dream. Gone are the day of everyone thinking, okay, maybe they're too hard on the guys, or maybe they don't do this, or maybe they don't do that. And looking up and realizing that they took a team poll last year, and the Jaguars, the biggest thing that the players complained about was communication and how their families are treated. I think that stuff is fixed. I think that is fixed. You're going to know exactly what you're expected. Your family's going to be treated well. All of those things are going to be fixed. If you are not a football playing Jesse, you won't be fixed here. I don't believe that. I'm going to get into a little bit of this, a little bit more, and why keeping things simple. When we sit here and try to figure out who they are, they're telling you right in plain sight who they are. And who they are is a lot tougher than the exterior you guys may think, because it's not about them. It's about them being appreciative of where they are in the process, and probably looking at anybody else like, if you don't think and act like this, then what are you here for? That's where I want to get on. I want to talk about keeping it simple before I tell you in segment 3 what exactly I think will happen this year with the Jaguars in the draft. We'll talk about that more here in just a second. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. If you ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Man, I do that all the time. Between dining out and online shopping and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you don't just manage your money, you start building wealth with your money. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Back to Locked On Jaguars, talking about keeping things simple after today's luncheon with GM James Gladstone, head coach Liam Cohen, and an exchange of pleasantries for about 5 minutes with EVP Tony Baselli. It gives you a little bit of an idea. You're watching them, and they don't look like a group of guys that don't have an idea of exactly what they're going to do in a week and 2 days when the draft starts. They look like they're in a pretty good spot, and they know 2 or 3 people that they can take. You have an idea of whether there are 1 or 2 quarterbacks coming off the board before they pick. And there's a little bit of there's some scenarios because Derek Carr's injury that kind of changes what maybe some of the teams in the first 12 picks would like to do or how they would like to maneuver. I would like to think that maybe it starts at number 5. If Shedeur gets picked prior to that, I don't think there's a bunch of movement opportunities for the Jaguars. If Shedeur Sanders, the quarterback out of Colorado, if he is still on the board at 5, that's where I think it could get kind of funny. It could get funny at the pick before at number 4. It really could. So that's why I say the Jaguars, in my mind, look like a group of people that are at the stage of the process where they pretty much expect that 1 or 2 dudes will be on the board when they pick. I think they like a bunch of people. I think there are a bunch of people that they believe could help upgrade their team, but you can't make but 1 pick. And the reason why I really want to think about keeping it simple is because picking at 5 isn't necessarily a place where you want to be too much, right? And you have to hope that if you're them, this is the last time for a long time the Jaguars will be picking 5th, right? So maybe it's time. I said yesterday, I was talking about Armand Mimbu. I was saying maybe it's time for them to pick something from a positional standpoint that normally you don't find without picking high in the draft or at some point picking it in the late in the first round, right? And that thing for me yesterday was offensive tackle. However, now I'm telling you, I haven't changed my mind about that. That's one particular strategy. The other one is to take Mason Graham, and I'll tell you why. Because it's been the obvious pick for a while. 2, Gladstone mentioned that the process for these scouts started years ago in terms of looking at these particular players. And I know we like to what do you say? Not necessarily use cliff notes, but we like to cram, right? When we start looking at players, which for a lot of us, it's once our team is out of contention in college football, you then turn and make all of your attention now be focused on the pro team that you follow or cover, and then start figuring out, because you got all this extra time because you ain't paying attention to recruiting and all that stuff because your team is losing, right? Y'all can tell I'm a Florida State supporter. So what happens is I've always taken a look at some guys, and I've always done that because I have a lot of spare time to do it, and things start taking shape. When I start personalizing it for the Jaguars is when I know whether or not they're going to be in or out of the playoffs. This year that was easy. The last couple of years, it wasn't because it came down to the last week of the season. But the way I feel about this process now is we're now doing to Mason Graham the opposite of what was done to Braden Fisk. And what I mean by that is they ignored Fisk. Everybody saying, yeah, nice little player. Then he gets to the draft and he's a little bit taller than people expected. and he runs faster than people expected. So now the thing that you see at the combine, rather, is with him, all of that stuff kind of made you go back and look at the tape and say, okay, that wasn't just him getting off, or that wasn't just him being an older player, or that wasn't just him playing in a quote unquote contract year. This is just who he is, because the explosiveness that you saw on tape was matched at his workout, and then you go back and it was substantiated once you saw it on tape again. And now you look at him in the NFL and he's doing the same thing, right? I think with Mason Graham, we're doing the total opposite. It's like for the 2 years, he's been like dominant. And then we're looking at it differently, because now, instead of him being a dude that shocked us and surprised us, he's exactly what at number 5 that, after watching him for 2 years, is where everyone thought he would be. And then he actually went to the combine and he didn't blow us away the way we thought. I thought he was going to be 320 pounds and he was 296. And that kind of shocked me and scared me a little bit. But what it also showed me is that a dude that's 320 pounds can work out and lose weight, and then work out and gain weight. And he doesn't have a problem holding the weight. He doesn't have a problem shedding bad weight. And if you put him in an NFL strength and conditioning program, that he'll be fine. That he'll find a place where he'll settle, and he'll settle there, and he'll play well. And I went back and watched a little bit of his tape right before I did this episode, and I'm like, I definitely can see what they like in him. And what I call it is a big body of work. There's a large body of work at a really, really big school where he won and he played at an extremely high level and was probably their best defensive player. When you think about that, and you think about when they talk about intangibly rich, he looks like a kid that just loves football, man. And it ain't just the eye black, and it's not just, okay, well, we didn't pick Aiden Hutchinson, so you might as well pick his interior alter ego. No, that ain't what I'm saying either. What I'm saying is that they're going to make a choice where there's a large body of work, where they don't have questions about the player. And while for 2025, it might not seem like the best piece that fits, he's not Dexter Lawrence. He is the best piece that's available to the team that's picking 5th, especially if that team doesn't want to pick 5th anymore. I thought about some other players. I thought about Ted McMillan, because that wingspan and all of that, that's different. That's a body of work too. And that's something that you can absolutely see where it fits. Ashton Genty, you see, you know, without question, you know what that is. And of course, Travis Hunter. Don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. He makes them better. I think he's starting at 3 technique here in Jacksonville, and that means you upgrade it. I think their run game improves. I think having him on the field with Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen, that means something, especially on 3rd down when you take the nose tackle out and now you got Mason Smith or Eric Armstead next to him. I think they become a really, really good football team. I absolutely do. I think they become a really, really good football team up front. And then when you look at 2026, and maybe there's no Eric Armstead, and maybe there's no competition with Mason Smith. Maybe Mason is a rotational player at that point. That's when you can look up and say, okay, yeah, we made the right decision. And there's nothing to stop them from addressing nose tackle later on in the draft. We talked about some of the names and mentioned some of the people that you can find a guy later on in the draft that can allow you to do the things that you want to do that Mason Graham doesn't necessarily help you do. But the Jaguars have more than one need. And the very first thing that they need, because you need a trade down partner, you need to know who you would pick in certain scenarios. So they're doing their little availability and functionality with their equipment. They said they're doing mocks, but James Gladstone basically said, no, those things, basically is to see if our equipment works. But I think through 5, it gives them a chance to see, okay, in these scenarios and these guys go. I'll mention a scenario in just a second involving the Patriots, because I don't think it's out of the wind that the Patriots can make the Jaguars go to their secondary pick, and they could take Mason Graham at number 4. They don't necessarily need him, but they could still take him or swap out with a team like the Raiders, that everybody thinks wants to take a running back, and the Raiders could move up a couple of spots and take Mason Graham. We'll talk about that, discuss that a little bit more in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, today's show is sponsored and brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are almost here. We know who is going to play who. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, you join FanDuel, whenever you join FanDuel, and place your first $5 bet, you'll get $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. I love how FanDuel makes betting so easy, whether it's picking my favorite team or diving into player props or even getting involved in the action while it's going on and trying to figure out, okay, how is the game going to end? Plus, after the game tips off, like I said, you can even combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win big. Don't miss out. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 in bonus bets today. All right, rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars. The GM and head coach of the Jaguars had a luncheon today for the media, a pre-draft luncheon. Didn't tell you a whole lot about their strategy, and that's a good thing. But if you pay attention, you would get some sort of an idea. I think they're going to keep it simple at 5. I think they have an idea who they're going to take. And I think that one of those 2 players is Mason Graham. Now, there's a scenario where the Patriots get fancy. Let's just say number 1 is obviously Cam Ward. Number 2 to Cleveland is either Carter or Travis Hunter. And then number 3 in that situation would be either whichever one of those players is left or Shedeur Sanders for the Giants, who I think the Giants took a look-see and had a private workout with Shedeur Sanders. And that's entirely possible, too, for them. If that happens, that leaves Abdul Carter and Mason Graham on the board at 4 for New England. If the Patriots want an offensive lineman, and say the Raiders or the Jets or Carolina wants to jump up to number 4, that could take Mason Graham off the board. You could argue that those teams don't necessarily need that type of interior defensive lineman, but you could also look at the way the Jets play defense, and they, the way that they played it all the time, you didn't necessarily need to have that nose guard into the game at that time, and they just played high-octane football. They could move up. And even though, a couple of those teams have players that can rush the passer, somebody might like Abdul Carter. Now, I think the Raiders and the Jets might be settled at that outside edge rush position, but certainly Carolina could come up and take Carter. If that is the case, then that leaves Mason Graham at 5 for Jacksonville. But what if Oakland or what if the Raiders want to come up and jump up and take Mason Graham? What if the Patriots decide that they're going to take another defensive lineman, with them probably running a little bit of an odd front where they can mix and match? I wouldn't put that past Mike Vrabel at all. The reason why I'm sitting there is because I don't think the Jaguars are going to be surprised if anyone is taken in front of them. But I do think that they are going to be prepared just in case 1 or 2 guys aren't there, then they'll switch up and go to the other position. Will Campbell is somebody that I think about, because that's another dude with a large body of work who was really, really good in college. And maybe they see something in him and they figure he can either compete at left tackle or more than, without a question, can upgrade them at left guard. So I also think they like their offensive line coaches a lot. And I think that they believe their coaches will be able to do some things with the guys that they have that, maybe get more out of them in what they're going to ask them to do and put them in a little bit of a better situation. But what I think happens is, I think unless they get a deal that knocks them off of their feet, and I don't believe in this draft they're going to get a deal that's going to knock them off their feet. I think they're going to stay there. They're going to keep it simple. They're going to draft someone that absolutely loves the game of football, who is going to be an upgrade at the position. That's why I believe it's going to probably end up being Mason Graham unless something weird doesn't happen. Now, I'll tell you this. Liam was asked about the wide receiver position, like guys outside of Brian Thomas Jr., that he believes, or I think someone phrased it like that they believe are the kind of targets that he said, well, you know, there are different types of wide receivers in the draft. Some have high catch radiuses. Some of them are guys that are ball in hand types, meaning once you put the ball in their hand, they turn into running backs. Other guys will take it off the top. There are a lot of different ways that you can approach that from what he said. And he said they're going to look at that in the draft, but he says right offhand, thinking about it, it's Dyami Brown and Parker Washington. Very interesting that he chose those two people, because that means that Dyami Brown is going to start out probably as an outside receiver and Parker Washington is your slot. To me, that means wide receiver 4 is Gabe Davis, and they're going to look to draft somebody else. It sounds like to me, Gabe Davis is on this team because he has to be. And I know that's a lot for me to draw from that. But yeah, you know, I was going to ask this other question today too, and I'll end it with this. There's rumors that Jalen Ramsey and the Rams are looking around to see if they can move him before the draft. James Gladstone has experience with Jalen Ramsey that is different from Tony Baselli's experience with Jalen Ramsey. And from the media. So to ask him if he'd be willing to I should have done it, but I just didn't. I know they can't also talk about players that are under contract. I just would like to know what his response would have been and how that contrasts with the way that the incumbent Jaguars fans or people that have been a part of the organization and Shad, because it's Shad's money, how it contrasts how Gladstone feels about Jalen Ramsey and how that contrasts with how the organization feels. Like, what if somebody called and say, hey, man, give us a 4th-round pick and you can take Jalen, and he's willing to do a contract extension for 2 years to lessen that money per year. Like, how does Shad feel? How does Gladstone feel having a championship Jalen Ramsey? He was on a team, there was a lot of elation. And it sounds like from the way Jalen left LA, goodwill, because they traded him to a team that he wanted to go to. And now Miami's doing the same thing. That would have been very, very interesting to see if he'd have bid on that, or if league protocol will have allowed him to answer that question. You're going to get a lot more questions answered as we move forward and get closer to the draft. Make sure you check out Locked On NFL Draft, because it'll help you figure out who some of these players are that can be day 2 and day 3 picks that James Gladstone sounds really, really confident that he'll be able to find guys that match up with what the Jaguars are trying to accomplish. Make sure you check out Damian Parsons and Coach Keith Sanchez on Locked On NFL Draft. All right, y'all, be getting closer and closer. Sounds like we just need to keep it simple. At number 5, who's worth it? There's only 5-6 players I think are worth it. And that if you take the quarterbacks off, then that maybe makes it 4 or 5 players. And it becomes pretty clear where the Jaguars are probably going to be going. And it's not a bad place. We'll continue to discuss that as we move forward, getting closer to the draft. Make sure you take care. We appreciate you spending 28 minutes with us today. We'll see you next time.